What's up, sneaker people? It's your boy FB Kicks and Gear, and I am back with another video. This time we are doing another ultimate legit checking / QC guide for the Jordan 2 Off-White Chicago colorway. Man, I have finally been able to get myself a pair of these Off-White 2s. I've actually worn them. I couldn't wait to wear them before I made the video for you guys. We got one pair here. This pair I got from lukick.ru. I've got another pair here. This one I got from Soul Gem. This is the H12 batch specifically. And then I have my authentic pair here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly go through the different features of the authentic shoe right here, and we are going to take a look at the overall materials. We're going to take a look at the signature, we're going to take a look at the text, and most importantly we're going to look at the sole and the different color hits all over the shoe. We're going to compare them to each batch, and this way you'll know and you'll have a sense for what an authentic pair should look like. But with all that said, let's start with the very basics. You can see they're taking a return to the original Air Jordan 2, which has a very slim toe box and a nice heel shape, not too high, not too low, but it's the slim toe box that is probably the most recognizable thing about this new iteration of Jordan 2s. So the H12 batch recreates that toe box very well. It's a little bit chunkier than the authentic pair, but not by much. And the common market batch does the same thing. Very slim, very good. It's not really a way to differentiate them, but it's something that you should keep in mind. Their shapes are pretty accurate. The next thing that I want to take a quick look at is the signature, the Michael Jordan signature here. This is going to be one of your easiest differentiators of an authentic pair and a fake pair. It is something that you can QC for, but for whatever reason, the rep pairs don't get it exactly right. So first thing we'll do is we'll compare it to the H12 batch. As you can see, positioning is very similar. The cuts of the leather cut here, H12 batch, is just a little bit bigger and larger than the authentic pair, but the signatures are the same size and they're positioned relatively the same way. But the difference you'll see is the bold weight of the replica pair signature. As you see here, it is very bold and it's not broken up like it is on the upper leather here on the authentic pair. As you can see, the texture cracks kind of fill in to the signature itself, and it breaks up the signature, makes it look old, makes it look faded. Meanwhile, on the H12 batch, it is very bold, very little breakup, and it just looks different. Even though the material looks similar, the signature itself looks different. And not only that, it's just a lot more overwhelming. And it's the same thing on the other shoe. As you can see, it's broken up, still very bold and dark in comparison. So when we go to the market batch over here, you'll see even more of a discrepancy in my opinion. It's very bold. Placement is very different, it looks like, as well. Just like the H12 batch, not much breaking up here, but positioning is sunken in on here, which probably speaks to the fact that this is like a lower cut than the authentic pair, which is weird, but that's a pretty big tell here. And we'll take a look at the other shoe, even more so. Very different when you're looking at the signatures. Now, this can vary on authentic pairs. It can absolutely vary, but it doesn't vary to this extent. This has almost no breakup in it, while this goes for that image. It goes for that faded old signature autograph, and it's just not held up on the rep pairs. So that means that you will be able to use this as a pretty good indicator of whether the one that you're looking at is real or fake. But most importantly, what you want to do is, if you're QCing for these, you want to make sure that you get a signature that's got some fading to it. And this is the H12 batch. This is the market batch. You can see how they compare to each other. The next thing we want to take a look at is the colors. Comparing colors is pretty hard to do if you don't have an authentic pair on hand to do a direct comparison. But what I want you to take a look at is the contrast specifically. If you take a look at the authentic pair, while the colors of the midsole and the back heel cup are not exactly the same. The contrast between them is very low. They are very close in color. Now, if you take a look at the H12 batch, H12 pair on the right, you can see, one, there's a color difference between the heel cup of the authentic pair and the H12 pair. It's definitely a lot warmer, not as dark on the authentic pair. But most importantly, you can see what that contrast looks like between the heel cup and the sole. And what you want to look for is make sure that they're at least very close in color. Obviously, when you have two different materials, they're not always going to match, but the less contrast, the better. And this almost has like a green tint to it, while the sole color is pretty good, but it's still a lot more yellow than the authentic pair. Now, if we take a look at the market batch, I feel like it's even more apparent. It looks even greener here. The sole is actually darker. The contrast there is pretty bad. You can tell right off the bat that they're not the same. So if you are legit checking and you want an authentic pair, take a look at that. You want this to be a nice bone color and this to be a slightly darker, more saturated, slightly, than the color of the heel cup. What you don't want is huge contrast like this, and you can see it on both. Clearly they're not the same. The H12 batch is definitely a little bit closer to retail, but still off, and the market batch is not as close at all. So that's one thing to look at here. From there, we can take a brief look at the off-white text on the medial side of the shoe. I will say that I don't necessarily think this is a really good indicator, only because this can vary pretty drastically. The only thing I would really focus on is making sure that the text has somewhat faded of a look. The bolder it looks, the worse off you are in comparison to whether or not you are close to retail. You don't want it too bold, especially on these non-textured panels. The market batch is a little bit bolder than I would like to see. H12 gets it better, but obviously the authentic pair is better suited. It looks better. It's got that old faded look like you come to see from off-white shoes. I will say that the bottom probably gets placement, the market batch probably gets placement a little bit better. I haven't seen many like this that you get to see a full-blown Oregon here, but if you're just comparing the market batch to this, definitely a lot closer. The next thing that you want to take a look at, and this is probably going to be next to the color contrast of the sole, probably going to be the easiest thing to be able to tell. You want to take a look at the sole, specifically the cracking design on the sole. So the one thing that I want people to really focus on this is that it looks like cracking. It looks like crumbling. And what that means is you've got some sharper defined edges when it comes to this. You're gonna get a little bit of bleed. That happens, right? You're gonna get a little bit of this TPU bleed over the clear resin, but it looks like cracking. But pay special attention over here. You know, you see these straight lines, these edges. It looks like a crumbling midsole. When you take a look at the H12 pair, and you look as a direct comparison, whatever they're doing here, it's like they have the correct pattern kind of close, but it just doesn't crumble the same way. It looks like a photocopy of what the authentic pair does. And you know, when you photocopy something over and over again, it loses definition, it loses quality. And I think that's what's going on here. You look at the shapes and the general shapes are there, but especially here, this looks like a crumbling midsole. This almost just looks like a oblong shape. And that's kind of the theme that's going on here. So take a look at the other shoe. I like to look here to see a decent window here into the sole. The H12 batch has it really foggy. You got the general shape, but like as I said, it just doesn't have the sharpness or the straight line, straight edges that you would see from like crumbling. Everything almost feels a little bit more with rounder edges and softer. It's close, don't get me wrong, and you can tell that underneath the haze, I'll call it, that the general shapes are there, but you want to look for cracking as opposed to, you know, just shapes, if that makes sense. I'm not looking for them to be exactly the same, but this looks like a crack. This doesn't look too bad, but I don't know. It's just hard to describe. They won't always be 100% identical either, but look at those shapes, make sure it looks like it's cracking. Believe it or not, I think in some cases this one does it a little bit better, but it still suffers from that same issue on the shoe specifically. A lot of the cracking is hidden, which is not necessarily what you want, but just looks a little bit better, but still kind of suffers from the same issue. You got this weird alien shape as opposed to it look like cracking. But this on this shoe definitely looks, on this side definitely looks a lot better, because the more it looks like cracking, the better. You don't want a lot of haze. There is some haze on the authentic pairs, but you don't want a lot. This is a really good example of what I would want to see. It's crazy that the market batch got it a little bit better than the more expensive H12 batch, but that's kind of what you want to see. Just make sure that, as I said, it looks like a crumbling midsole. That's the best advice that I can give you. It's just supposed to look like it's crumbling, not just kind of weird organic shapes here. This just looks like there's a hole in there. It doesn't look like a crumbled midsole. Next thing you want to take a look at, this is probably a pretty good legit checking method. Look at the shoelaces. Most importantly, look at the quotation marks. They're slimmer on the top one, which is the authentic. They're kind of bulky on the rep ones. That's generally the case across the board. You've got bulky, chunky quotation marks when that is not the case on the authentic pair. And then on the market batch, we got, let's see what we got here. Slightly better, but still pretty bulky compared to the authentic pair. So, and probably the last thing that we'll take a look at outside of more, you know, there's just little nuanced stuff here, is the hang tag, the authentic hang tag. Pay attention to the font, the lettering, the color of the plastic. This is the hang tag for the H12 pair on the bottom with the crack. Obviously you don't want a crack there, but there's nothing that I can see that would tell you that a crack couldn't happen on the authentic pair. But take a look at the letters. It's bolder, darker on the H12 pair and slightly bigger text, I would say. And then if you look at the market batch, the plastic is definitely a lot more yellow, but I'd say that the text looks a little bit closer. So I'll say that that's probably the end for all of the nuances between the two batches. So if you care about small details, if you care about overall consistency, I would probably say go the H12 route. It's not perfect. It's got some color issues. It's got issues with the sole specifically not being as accurate, but it's overall the better shoe. I think that, like, for me, what I like is the fact that as a legit checker, I'm gonna look for this line to eliminate this market batch, and they have it here. So that's pretty good. So with all that said, that's it, guys. That's the information that I have for you. Obviously, there are plenty of stuff that you can lean on to distinguish an authentic pair. Obviously, if it has the right looking sole, the contrast isn't too great between the heel cup and the sole itself, if the mold line is there and it's got a signature that is broken up and it looks kind of faded, you're looking at an authentic pair 99.999% of the time. If it has some of those issues that we talked about for these two, you know that it's fake, and you should know what you're looking for on the authentic pair so that you can properly either rule these out or make sure you're getting the best version of these that you possibly can. So yeah, guys, that's it. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.